Our first example is video 12.1 file read write. This is simply a copy of our last demo from the previous section of the course, which performs file reading and writing, saving and loading back dictionary items. The dictionary is named contacts. So first, let's just simply run this code in the current directory. Everything works fine. It executes, it saves the file, it loads the file, it verifies that everything is loaded correctly, and it creates this file named contacts.txt, just as we saw everything exactly like this last week. But this time, let's examine the content of our code and what parts of does it consist. So first of all, we have some global definitions or global variables that we use here. So there's an index, there is contacts, there are a couple of imports, everything at the global level, right? So it's just basically part of the main execution. So of course, imports are not executable. They're just telling Python interpreter that we would like to use these modules somewhere in this file. Okay, so then we have more global definitions like file name, preserve standard output. We continue to use the strict to redirect standard output into a file using straightforward prints to print everything into this file that gets created and has this already well-discussed format. Okay, and if you think about it, this is the portion of the program where, again, at this main level, at the global level, we open the file, we try to process it, and it's this section here is for writing information into the file. And what it does is it does something custom. It's specific to our application. It's not very generic, just custom written code to create specific file format. But at the same time, very likely, if this was a real application, if this code was not a small little demo program, but excuse me, rather, if this was a real commercial application with lots of functions and user interacting with this, perhaps this part of code with opening the file for saving it would be called and used multiple times. It's just a note that very likely that we probably don't want to have this code just basically at the main level. We want to make it as reusable as possible, because in reality, what it does, it takes our dictionary name contacts, and it takes the file name, and it does the work, right? So it saves the information in a file, in a specific format. So it's just defined by this with open statement and this loop over the contacts that's creating records in our file. So this is something important to note, that this is likely needs to be highly reusable piece with all the try and except decorations, with expecting all sorts of errors, error handling, all of this. This section of the code definitely has a high potential to be reused in multiple times over the life cycle of a running program. Very similar to the loading part. Right here, we're just using it for loading the file just for the demonstration, just to verify that we're capable of writing and reading the information to and from a file in the correct manner, so that we can reconstruct our dictionary exactly the same way. And in the end, we make some verifications whether there were any errors. Basically, just use this assert statement to check whether the original context is equals to the new context, which was loaded by this portion of the program. Now, notice that we have more global definitions over here. right? So again, we say that we depend on the file name in this section of the program. We, of course, create a copy of our dictionary, which we will populate from a file. But once again, this has a potential to be reused multiple times, to be called multiple times with perhaps different dictionaries, and also maybe with different file names that the user wants to use. Now, these constant input state indicators, as I call them here, so that we control the state of our input, these values are used only in the section of the program that internally, like used internally here, when we use this with open statement to open file for reading and do all the processing to load the information, right? So the scope of these three, as an example of these three variables, is actually limited to only this section where we use these variables somewhere deeply inside this loop for every line that we read from the input file. Okay, so perhaps this could be somehow also reorganized, that this does not need to be at the global level, but somehow this should only belong to the section of the program that deals with this specific loading of information from a file. Okay, and again, everything is decorated by try and catch because we're anticipating some errors, and we discussed the errors in our previous section, but also this error handling perhaps belongs to a specific area of the program that can be reused multiple times. So this is just a copy and paste from the previous week, but this is the overview of what we have in there. And the question is, what could we do better with this code? Could we organize it in more clear manner and create the same program, but which would be much better organized, and therefore make it more maintainable and more open for future modifications? So let's see what we can do in this direction.